Hey, I'm your host, Kevin Noon, and welcome to the Big Me Kickoff. It is Friday, November 5th, one day before the Nebraska game, and not that far away from the Michigan game. I'm not going to get into all the numbers. That's something that Tom Moore does on the Morning Scoop, and I would never infringe upon his copyright. But again, it's the Big Me Kickoff. I'm Kevin Noon here on Buckeye Scoop, and getting you ready for the upcoming game. Ohio State, Nebraska series at Ohio State leads 9-1, leads 7-1 since Nebraska came into the Big Ten. Nobody wants to talk about that 2011 game. I was there. It was probably worse to witness in person than it was to witness on television, let me tell you. And that's all we will say about that one. So if you like that, be sure, if you're watching us on YouTube, to subscribe to the channel, hit that thumbs up. If you're listening to us on Spreaker or Apple iTunes or any of those great formats, be sure to subscribe. It really helps us out, helps the algorithm and all that good stuff. Means a lot to me. So once again, subscribe. Don't miss a single episode, not only of my show, but of everybody's show here at Buckeye Scoop. A lot of hardworking guys putting on a lot of great content. So don't miss out on that. Don't miss a show. All right, we got that plug out of the way. Maybe one more time a little later in the show, but we've got that out of the way. What are your thoughts about Nebraska? I mean, it's a team that's sitting at 3-6. All 6 losses have come by 8 points or less. Hard luck team. I mean, it's a hard luck team. It's got to be tough to be a Nebraska fan. They were supposed to go overseas to play their first game. That got scuttled. They got to go to beautiful Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, instead to take on the Illini, Brett Bielema, in week 0. So Nebraska's played one more game than most teams out there. This will be their 10th game, Nebraska's 10th game of the season. Again, sitting at 3-6. Played Oklahoma close, but has played a lot of teams close. And just has not been able to get away with the dub. So what gives? I've done a lot of studying on Nebraska this week, probably more than I thought I ever would do, because, well, that's what I do. That's what we do here at Buckeye Scoop. We give you the scoop, we do the studying for you, and then we pass it on. They start the season 2-1. They lose to Illinois. They beat Fordham. They beat Buffalo. They go into that Oklahoma game. They drop it 23-16. They give Michigan State all Michigan State can handle. They shut down Kenneth Walker. They lose that one 23-20 in overtime in a game that Nebraska absolutely should have won. But I will say right now that I don't think that Michigan State knew that it was Michigan State at that point. Or better yet, Michigan State knew it was Michigan State, the bad Michigan State team that kind of was on its downward decline at the end of the Mark D'Antonio years, the Michigan State team that kind of was on the mat at the beginning of the Mel Tucker years. Those Mel Tucker years may be short-lived because LSU may come a-knocking for him. One way or the other, 23-20 on the short end. They come out and blow out Northwestern, a really bad Northwestern team that honestly misses Mike Hankwitz, its DC, who retired. And I'm not putting this at the feet of the new defensive coordinator. I'm just saying you lose Hankwitz, you lose most of that linebacker core. You still have questions on offense. It's a rough day in Evanston. But, again, I'm here to talk about Nebraska right now. I'm not here to talk about the other teams. And then 3-point loss to Michigan, 7-point loss to Minnesota, 5-point loss to Purdue. Of those 3 teams, I mean, Michigan obviously being a top 10 team and higher before it lost to Michigan State. I mean, that was another crusher. Minnesota has somehow gotten back into the Big Ten West race. I think that just kind of talks about the state of the Big Ten West. And then Purdue, I don't know what to make of Purdue. I mean, they can pass, they can't run, they can play some defense, but they can't do this, they can't do that, but they can do this. I'll say this, as an Ohio State person, I'm much happier that game is going to be in Columbus and West Lafayette. But now you have, now you're sitting with Nebraska at 3-6. They have to win out to be bowl eligible. They've got Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Spoiler alert, they're not going to a bowl. They're just not going to win all 3 of those games. They may not win any of them. They might win one of them. I don't know. I mean, Iowa can't score. Iowa's offensively challenged. Wisconsin suddenly is a hot team. We'll talk about them when we talk a little bit about the college football playoff. and then, of course, Ohio State. But I think so much of the conversation when it comes to Nebraska starts with Adrian Martinez, who has been there for like 11 years, it feels like. And the reason it feels like that is Adrian Martinez, there was Taylor Martinez, there were a lot of Martinezes. And it just kind of runs together at this point because both quarterbacks do just enough, but don't do quite enough, if that makes sense. Adrian Martinez is not a bad athlete. Adrian Martinez is not a bad dude, but he can't get over the hump. Taylor Martinez, I felt the same way. I think Adrian's a little better than Taylor. So you have two quarterbacks with the same last name running over the course of a decade, and it just kind of feels like one long carryover with Tommy Armstrong kind of thrown in the middle. And yeah, there were some other guys in there. I mean, I remember the year. I mean, even recently when Adrian Martinez got knocked out of a game and they had to bring in. I'm trying to find my Excel notes if I can get them. I have a great breakdown that I've done of the series itself. You know, there's some names that have come in that, you know, maybe don't resonate really well. I mean, you know, this was supposed to be one of the McCaffreys before he transferred out, and that didn't end up happening. You know, they had Lee and they had Fife, and, you know, I mean, so, you know, names that don't necessarily ring a bell, but Adrian Martinez has been the leading passer in the last 3 games. And then, you know, Ohio State and Nebraska, due to the unbalanced schedule, don't play every year, but they played every year since 16. And then you got to go back to 12 and 11, and that was Taylor Martinez. So again, about a decade out, Martinez is on both sides. Well, there you go. So, I mean, let's look at Taylor Martinez's numbers. I mean, he's completing about 63% of his passes, 150 for 240, 2,200 and change in passing yardage, 12 touchdowns, 7 picks, but most of those picks came last week against Purdue when Adrian imploded. Their backup is Logan Smothers, 7 of 11, no touchdowns, no picks, 119 yards. Talked to a buddy of mine on another show who is a Nebraska writer, said that the gap between Martinez and Smothers is gigantic. And really, with the 3 games that are left on the schedule, how do you bring Smothers in at this point when Scott Frost is so embattled? And I'm getting off of my script here of what where I wanted this to go, but what does Nebraska do if Scott Frost is not the answer? That's the problem sometimes when you go and you meet your heroes. You bring your hometown guy back, and if that doesn't work out, then what do you do? I'm looking at you, Michigan, because it's very similar but yet very different, because Michigan wins the games it should win and then drops the games that are 50-50 or 60-40, 70-30 in the other direction. I can't even say that Nebraska is winning the games that it should win. So it's an even worse situation there, but I guess maybe it's not, because in Michigan, you're really hamstrung, because if it's not Jim Harbaugh, then who? But, you know, Jim Harbaugh came in definitely with more pomp and circumstance and hoopla than Scott Frost. And Scott Frost came in with plenty after what he was able to do at UCF. But where have we seen this before? Somebody gets something done at a program that doesn't play Big Ten style football, Big Ten competition, everything else, and it all kind of falls to you know what. I go back to Rich Rod. I mean, Rich Rod was going to come in and revolutionize the Big Ten, and all he did was recruit 5'11" and 6 foot players. And honestly, at the end of his era, they had a roster full of guys that were just not built to play in the Big Ten. And I'm the biggest person to say, these are kids. They're somebody's son. They're somebody's brother. I don't trash the kids. But I will say, when a player doesn't fit a program, and Michigan had plenty of those players, I look at Nebraska trying to bring this home. I see a lot of guys that don't fit the program. Look, congratulations to Adrian Martinez for playing 11 years at Nebraska or whatever the hell it is. But they've stuck with him longer than I thought they would. Look at Ramir Johnson. I mean, he's a young running back. I mean, it's been a while since they've had just a bruiser there. I mean, Divine Ozigbo was a fine back. I liked him. But I don't look at Nebraska and say, wow, that's a team that can really run. I mean, Marquise Stepp, they bring him in. They got Jacquez Yant. I like him as kind of a change of pace back, but where are the running backs? It's a long ways away from when they had kind of a really great 1-2 punch at receiver. JD Spielman transfers out, now is retired from football. Read that this week, I think, maybe last week. It all kind of runs together. They're really having to hit the transfer portal, and that hasn't necessarily worked out wonderfully. I mean, they get the Samori Toure kid out of Montana. I think he's really good, but then what? I mean, they have Austin Allen, the tight end. I think Austin Allen may be probably my favorite offensive player on the team. And, okay, that may be a little bit of a joke inside of, Ohio State's always saying that they're going to go to the tight end. Well, Nebraska has. He's second on the team with 27 catches. He's got 2 touchdowns, 371. He's only behind the Montana transfer, 29 catches, 568, 3 touchdowns. But this all goes back to Martinez. He just, I mean, you look at his numbers this year, they're not horrible in terms of yardage. I mean, he hasn't had a 300-yard passing game yet. I understand that. I mean, as I look at his game log and going on one of those pages that insists on doing autoplay, which is so annoying. I hate that, but whatever. Yeah, he's gotten up to 291 against Michigan. He's had one game where he had 3 passing touchdowns, and that was against Michigan. A couple of games where he had 2, Purdue and Buffalo, and then it's either 1 or 0. And to his fortune, it was only one time it was 0, and that was in that Michigan State overtime loss. But you look at Martinez, and he's had 200-yard rushing games, Illinois and Buffalo. So week 1 and week 3. Since then, those numbers have kind of gone down. His high water mark, 21 carries against Michigan State for 72 yards, but a couple of scores. He had 3 scores on the ground against Northwestern. But again, that was 56-7. Everybody had a turn there. Minnesota held him into negative yardage. Purdue, 10 carries, 18 yards. Martinez is averaging something like 80 yards a game in his 3 starts against Ohio State. 15, 16, 17 carries a game, 80-some yards. I think he has 4 touchdowns on the ground in 3 games. That's where his biggest threat is. That's really where his biggest threat is. Now, as well as Nebraska has played, and, all 6 of its losses have been by 1 score. I get it. So, does that mean that you should pick this to be a 1-score game? Well, the line's 15. But I'm having a hard time seeing this game being a blowout. But then again, I picked Penn State to be a blowout, in Ohio State's favor, and it was a nutbuster. I mean, it was tough. 9 points. It was, Ohio State came out, looked pretty meh. I mean, the entire game was bad from the red zone. It took a couple of really good individual performances to get over that hump. So, I don't know. I mean, what about the Nebraska defense? And that's the thing there that that I do like about this team. And it's not necessarily a team that I'm like, wow, it just filled with NFL guys. But you sit there and you look at Cam Taylor-Britt. You sit there and you look at Chris Doman. You look at, they've got some guys that are emerging on that defensive line. It's probably not the type of black shirt defense that people remember certainly back in the Big 8 days, but maybe even some Big 12 time. But, I think it's a pretty good defense. But with that being said, Nebraska hasn't faced a dual threat offense this year. And when, the closest thing was the Oklahoma game, and that was a Spencer Rattler game and not a Caleb Williams game. So that Oklahoma offense has really kind of transformed under Caleb Williams. No, I'm not one of these people who's trying to send Caleb to New York for the Heisman at this point. But I think he is the better fit there right now. I think the offense it's night and day from what it was under Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler probably will be somewhere else next year, whether it's wherever Lane Kiffin is, Ole Miss. And I've heard some other names attached to Ole Miss as well, which may or may not be as dependent upon whether or not Kiffin is there. But when Caleb Williams came out of high school, he was mentioned every bit as much as Spencer Rattler was. And that's when people say, well, you can't stockpile quarterbacks. Oklahoma's done it. Ohio State's done it. I mean, we may see the great exodus after this season at both schools, but you can do it and you can replicate it and you can keep doing it when you're a top program. So you look at this, and Nebraska gave up 32 to Michigan, 30 to Minnesota, 28 to Purdue, 23 to Michigan State, 23 to Oklahoma, 30 to Illinois. There are no 40s in there. There are no 50s in there. Ohio State has hung some gigantic numbers on Nebraska through the years. I mean, there have been just some games that have been gross. I mean, almost uncomfortable. It's been so lopsided. And the reason why I say that, as I'm pulling up some stats, as I say that it's been uncomfortable, is Nebraska football fans are some of the best people out there, certainly in the Big Ten. They're so knowledgeable. They're very welcoming. That trip, if you've never made the trip to Lincoln, I highly recommend making the trip to Lincoln. If you get a chance to sit there and Nebraska comes to Columbus and you're there, buy them a beer. Buy their fans a beer. They're long-suffering fans. They deserve something. They're really good people. Yeah, it doesn't hurt that I probably have 150, 200 followers on Twitter that are all Nebraska fans due to the fight for football and Nebraska and Ohio State kind of leading the charge. I mean, I would say Nebraska was probably more visible at first than even Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State's like, don't worry, we're coming. But Nebraska got out there first. Nebraska was the first team trying to sit there and set up okay, if the Big Ten's not playing, we're going to set up an independent schedule. And then, the Big Ten came in and kind of wrapped them on the knuckles. And then Ohio State sat there and threw its weight out there and said that it wanted to try something. And then, we know what happened. The Big Ten ended up coming back, and it was a bit of a mess in terms of how the season worked. Don't want to talk about the 2011 game. I don't really want to talk about 2020 either. But as I sit here and I finally have my stat page, Ohio State in the Big Ten series, which means starting with the game that we will not talk about. I mean, that game Ohio State scored 27. Since then, Ohio State has not scored fewer than 36 points, and that was the 18 game. Ohio State has broken the 60-point mark twice, the 50-point mark twice, the 40-point mark once, and then, of course, at 36. So Ohio State puts up a ton of points, and on the other side, that 18 game was a bit of an anomaly because it was 36-31, and a lot of those, Nebraska put up some points at the end in terms of garbage points, but, oh no, the game suddenly got close. But outside of that, 17-7, that 31, 14, 3, 38, and 12, but that was 63-38. And that was the year after it happened. And then, of course, that was the 34-27 Nebraska win. I'm not going to talk about the games in 56 and 55. I'm old, but I'm not that old, so I don't remember those games. I wasn't around. I'm pretty sure most of you weren't around. If you want to hear about them, shoot me a message in the comments somewhere, and I'll talk about them maybe directly to you, because I don't know if a lot of people are interested in hearing about those games. But was talking about the Nebraska defense, and it's holding teams into the 30s and into the 20s. And then you have Ohio State coming out here who's scoring very much into the 40s. Something's going to have to give there. Whether or not, Ohio State just kind of blows that scoring average for them, or Ohio State is still a little lost in the wilderness from the Penn State game. I mean, going on the road to play a noon road game, people are like, well, it's 11. Well, it's 11 Central Time, but it's noon body clock for the Ohio State guys. So it's not like that they're playing an hour earlier in terms of what they're used to doing. It's just what the clock reads in Lincoln versus Columbus. And a reminder, we fall back Sunday, so be sure to set your clocks. I'm kind of saying that to myself too, so I don't forget. So what is the Nebraska defense going to, what is it going to try and take away? Is it going to go, I mean, I don't think it's got the dudes that Penn State has in terms of 1 to 11 on the defense. Cam Taylor-Britt's every bit as good of a defensive back as I've seen this year. I'm a big fan of his. Doman is somebody that can play at multiple levels. I really like him too. But I don't think that Nebraska is going to be able to shut down the run the way that Penn State did. I don't think Ohio State's going to be taken by surprise. And that's not to say that Ohio State wasn't prepared, but I think that Penn State did some things under Brent Pry that Ohio State wasn't exactly expecting. And the problem was that I think the offensive line had its worst game of the season against Penn State. So, Nebraska will run 3-4, will run some other looks. I mean, I'm going to really defer to Ross Fulton in terms of, when he does his postmortem of the game, what all that is. I can tell you the difference between a 3-4 and a 4-3, but he starts talking about things that I have no idea about. And that's why I'm glad he's on our team and that he can explain that to y'all, because I don't know. But we're 20 minutes, and I was only planning on going 30. I got 14,000 more topics, so I'll start to digress here. I like Ohio State to win this one about 35-14, and here's why. I think that Ohio State comes out a little flat. I think that Ohio State really is going to try and just work on some fundamental types of things. You need to win the game. Absolutely need to win the game. So you're not going to screw around and run something, generic and vanilla. But I think Ohio State has 2 weeks to really make sure that the machine is working before Michigan State and Michigan. So I think Ohio State's going to find some things that it wants to focus in on, is going to work on those things. And I think that they might bog down a little bit. And I'm not saying it's going to be a red zone bog down. I'm not picking any field goals. I'm saying 35. That's 5 touchdowns. And then on the other side, I think Taylor Martinez will have a big play somewhere in there. Ohio State's not shutting any teams out this year. They're just not. So they're going to put up some points. God forbid if Nebraska scores first, Buckeyes Twitter or Ask the Insiders board, everything goes nuts at that point. Oh my God, all hope is lost. Relax. Ohio State's going to win. Ohio State's going to cover. It may not be the bloodbath that y'all are looking for, but I also think that, I think Ryan Day really likes Scott Frost, and I don't think he's going to sit there and put it on him. But with that being said, if I'm wrong and Ohio State just comes out there and plays murder ball, whatever Ohio State puts up in 3 quarters is what Ohio State's going to put up. And if you just get in the way, sorry, but Ohio State needs to try and look good along the way. Ohio State wins its games, it's going to get in the college football playoff. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Let me back out of the page that I was on. I want to talk about briefly, a couple of other Big Ten games. I'm just backing out. I think 2 more pages. There it is. Michigan State, Purdue. Purdue knocked off Iowa, then came out and kind of laid an egg, and then comes back and beats Nebraska. We don't really know what's going on with this Purdue team. Michigan State gets outplayed for a good part of its game and then just says, all right, well, if you're going to let us hang around, takes it to Michigan. So you have Michigan State as only a 3-point favorite in West Lafayette. Now, the spoiler makers are the spoiler makers. Did they shoot their shot? Was that the Iowa game? Was that it? Or do they have another upset in them? Fans better hope that they don't have too many more upsets in them, with Purdue set to play Ohio State the following week. But I'm interested in that game. I'm really interested in that game. I'm interested to see if Purdue plays all 3 quarterbacks. I'm interested to see what happens when Michigan State takes on a team that is almost entirely throwing the ball, because Purdue can't run. So, I think that there's some issues on the back end for Michigan State's defense. I think Purdue can exploit some things. Obviously, the odds makers seem to think so. You got a team that's number 3 going on to play a 5-3, 3-2 team in Purdue, and it's a field goal, which means, people are not that confident. I'll be interested once the sharps come in to see where the money is on that one. So that's one game I'm going to be watching. Wisconsin-Rutgers. Wisconsin somehow has gotten itself back into the conversation. 5-3, 3-2 as well. They're not very good on offense. And by not very good, I mean not good. The defense is really good. But with that being said, I don't know. I mean, if Wisconsin holds you to 7, Wisconsin may struggle to get to 10. I mean, so I'm interested there. That would be just the quintessential Greg Schiano upset, to just, to take out a team like that, because who's going to win the West? I mean, and I don't even have the West schedule in front of me. Maybe we'll talk about that next week as Ohio State gets ready to play Purdue. We'll do a segment talking about where the West race stands and what the scenarios are. I don't want to get into it now. I'm really interested in the Penn State-Maryland game. Penn State now has dropped 3, but, Penn State played Ohio State very well. Does the loss linger? Does Penn State fall off the cliff? Does Penn State say, we took Ohio State as deep as we could, but we're a good team. Sean Clifford's healthy. Let's go. Does Penn State play a spoiler role in the Big Ten East? Maryland's sitting at 5-3, 2-3 in conference play. They can throw the ball around a little bit. They can do some things, but and the game's in College Park instead of State College, so I don't know. Penn State 10-point favorite. I think I like Penn State in this one. I like it, but nothing would surprise me. Nothing would surprise me in that game. And then I also have Indiana, Michigan. Michigan coming off of the loss, gets knocked out of the ranks of the unbeaten, now has to take on an Indiana team that's pretty bad. Game's in Ann Arbor, 20-point line. I'm watching this one more so for what happens against the line. I don't think Indiana has a chance to win this game. But with what happened against Michigan State, does Indiana find some weaknesses? Now, Indiana cannot run the ball at all, and Kenneth Walker ran the ball. So Indiana's not built to beat Michigan. That's plain and simple. But can they find some other weak points and apply pressure there? This is more of a case of a game that you watch to see what a team that should be able to play some decent defense, what they can do against that Michigan offense. And then you kind of carry that forward. So that's why I'm going to watch that one. Again, a bit of a dog, 20 points. That's a lot of points. Finishing out the Big Ten, Iowa is a 12-point favorite at Northwestern. Illinois and Minnesota are playing. Illinois is a 14.5-point road dog. And I think that is it. So let's go to the top 25. Not a lot of national games that I care about. Going through some of the tops, Missouri's at Georgia. Wake at UNC. Now, UNC is a 2.5-point favorite. Wake is undefeated and number 9 in the rankings. Wake is sitting 8-0. Carolina's 4-4. This was supposed to be some huge coronation of Sam Howell. Sam Howell this and Sam Howell that. Well, how's it going, Sam Howell? You've had a bad year. Your team has had a bad year. Mac Brown looks like he's aged several years in just a couple of months. Is this the game where Wake Forest feels the weight of being undefeated, being the only team out there really for the ACC, and do they crumble? We've seen Cincinnati screw around a little bit and get pushed. Does Wake crumble? So I'll be interested in that game. You got Liberty and Ole Miss in the Hugh Freeze Bowl. That game's in Oxford. Ole Miss is a 9.5-point favorite. I'm looking at the games I care about. Tulsa and Cincinnati. I mean, Tulsa's 3-5, 2-2. Cincinnati 22.5-point favorite. I'm afraid to. And I don't. I like the lines. I don't really dabble because sports wagering is illegal in Ohio. So don't let me catch you doing it, folks. I'm not confident in Cincinnati covering big lines right now. Notre Dame and Navy. Notre Dame's a 21-point favorite. Oak State and WVU, and that's in Morgantown. Oak State 3.5-point favorite. That's going to be an interesting one. I think if you're an Ohio State fan, you want to see Oak State just keep winning. Stay confident, get into that Oklahoma game, get into Bedlam, and take down the Sooners. Baylor TCU, that'll be a fun game to a certain extent. TCU, though, Gary Patterson's out. Where's TCU's mind going to be? In a ranked versus ranked game, we got Auburn and Texas A&M. Auburn is 13th. A&M is 14th. Pretty much everybody in the SEC is in the college football playoff top 25. I'll get into that in a minute. A&M is a home favorite, 4.5 points. I'm thinking that A&M's going to have a hard time slowing down Tank Bigsby. I really do. I'm taking, even though Auburn is ranked 13th and A&M's 14th, I'm taking Auburn as an upset special. You've got Idaho State and BYU. Idaho State's 1-7. Yuck. Mississippi State and Arkansas. Mississippi State is ranked 17th. Arkansas is a 5-point home favorite. NC State and FSU. Alabama and LSU is a game that you would think you would be interested in. And then you remember, oh, wait, LSU's horrible this year. 4-4, 2-3 in conference. Alabama, a 28.5-point favorite. That's a lot of points. That's a lot of points against a marquee opponent, at least in terms of the name on the front of the jersey. LSU is not good this year. Everybody's hurt. Where is the mental part of this? I don't think anybody's head is in it. Tennessee, Kentucky. Tennessee is a 1-point road favorite going to Lexington. That'll be a fun game. That's a 7 p.m. game. Oregon and Washington will be your 7:30 Eastern ABC game. Washington, not very good. We saw what Michigan did to them. You know, does Oregon start to feel the pressure, though? Is this where something slips? Oregon, a 7-point road favorite. So, I mean, at least it's not 14, 17, 19 points. I mean, it's relatively close. Maybe Vegas is just begging on people to put money on Washington. I'll be interested in that one. And then our late night game, we got 24th ranked San Diego State, Brady Hoke against Hawaii in Hawaii. So that's what we've got there as we do our weekly rundown of some of the games that I will be watching or at least aware of. Now at 30 minutes or so, and we haven't even started talking about the college football playoff. So I'll try and be quick. I try not to let these shows run too long. I appreciate everybody who sticks through it with me. That's fantastic. What are your thoughts? Ohio State's 5th. I think Ohio State is in fantastic position. Fantastic position being 5th because you got Michigan State 3rd. Ohio State has to play Michigan State. If Ohio State beats Michigan State, there's no way that that's not a quality win. Ohio State's going to have to move up. Georgia and Alabama have to play each other. I do not like Alabama being 2. And I've heard all the talking heads, and I understand to a point. Don't worry about it. If Alabama wins out, then, you know, you deal with that situation. Alabama deserves to be up there. They'll be SEC champions because they'll play Georgia in the SEC championship game. If Georgia beats Alabama, or if Alabama loses before it gets to Georgia, like to Auburn or something like that, Alabama's sitting with 2 losses, at least. And things will take care of themselves. But I just think it's a bit of a insult to our intelligence to throw Alabama in at number 2. And I get it that Texas A&M is playing much better football now than it was playing earlier in the year. It was an unranked, A&M was unranked at the time. And once again, it just goes to show our good losses are better than your good wins. So, do you have a bigger problem with Alabama being 2, or just the fact that most of the SEC is ranked for one reason or another? And let me go through this. Georgia 1, Alabama 2. I'm scanning through here. You have Auburn 13, Texas A&M 14, Ole Miss 16, Mississippi State 17, Kentucky 18. Now, the SEC only has 7 teams ranked. The Big Ten has 6 teams ranked. But the Big Ten also has 3 of its teams 20, 21, and 22. So maybe we're splitting hairs a little bit, but does Kentucky really need to be ranked? Should really anybody not named Georgia out of the SEC East be ranked? I mean, again, I would be totally fine if Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa weren't ranked if anybody from the Big Ten or the SEC East outside of Georgia wasn't ranked. But, you know, I don't know. I mean, people can be up in arms about UTSA, UT San Antonio not being ranked, being undefeated. I mean, their best win was Illinois. Congrats. But with that being said, I don't know. I have a problem with that. It'll all sort itself out, but it just feels like teams are going to be artificially propped up to push a narrative. You know, well, we have to have 2 SEC teams. Look, they beat 6 ranked teams. Really? I don't know. I mean, things will work itself out. Ole Miss and Mississippi State play each other in the Egg Bowl. You've got these things set up in place. But if you start teams high enough and they only lose 1, then it's like, oh, well, We're not going to drop the loser of 16 versus 17 out of the rankings, and we certainly need to move the winner up of 16 versus 17 up in the rankings. So I don't know. The one thing I'll say, and I finally got back around to watching the show, the CFP show, is that the CFP put a lot of emphasis on head-to-head, which is why Oregon is 4 and Ohio State is 5, why Mississippi State is ahead of Kentucky, even though neither of them really should be ranked. There's a lot of that going on. So that's all well and good. But I'll make the argument when it comes to like Ohio State and Oregon. Ohio State loses to a ranked Oregon team who was 11 at the time. Oregon loses to an unranked Stanford team who was still not ranked at this time. So Oregon proved it could beat Ohio State head-to-head. That absolutely matters. Absolutely matters. But at no point are you going to sit there and put anything into the fact that Oregon lost to Stanford, a subpar Stanford team. Or does that just magically get erased? That's magically erased because of the win. And yes, Oregon is sitting with one of the best wins in the country this year. I get it. That's fantastic. But, I'll be interested to see in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, if Oregon is still ahead of Ohio State, provided both teams keep winning. But we'll get much more into college football playoff in later shows. Be sure to join us on Tuesdays when Tom Orr and Tony Gerdeman and myself, we do our live college football playoff rankings reveal show. We do not reveal the rankings. That is an ESPN product. But you get to watch us reacting to it. And then Tom and I will get to talk when Tony jumps on a conference call. He'll share some information from what he gets on the conference call, and we will kind of go from there. So that's one of our great shows. Be sure to join us on Friday, which I guess is today, because we're airing this show on Friday. Tom, Tony, and myself, we will do our Buckeye Weekly Live. Your chance to interact live with us as we talk about whatever you want to talk about. The Nebraska game, plenty of other things, a lot of fun on that show. Then, of course, on game day, we have our pregame show. We have our postgame show. I join Tom for Morning Scoop on Sunday. We got all the bases covered here at Buckeye Scoop. So, again, I told you I would go back to this one more time. Be sure to subscribe. If you're getting us on YouTube, hit the bell. Don't miss a single episode. Listen to all of our great content. We've got so much great content on the show. Not a member of Buckeye Scoop? Come on board. Check us out. But I think we're going to call it a show here at this point, as it is almost beer o'clock, and it's my birthday weekend. I need to go out and start getting my free beers that friends owe me. But I want to thank you all for taking 38 minutes or so. We're closing in on 38 minutes to listen to the Big Me Kickoff. Couldn't do this show without you. It means the world to me that you joined us. All of our regulars out there, I know that you listen to all of our content. Become a regular. Listen to everything there. But once again, I'm Kevin Noon. It's a Big Me Kickoff. I want to thank you for listening and talk to you here very soon.